Hello?
Hello, hi there. This is the voice in your head. Remember to drink water.
Damn, I wish intrusive thoughts were this kind.
Oh, Lily.
Welcome to Academically Distanced, a series of discussions with people from all across FSU on their experiences in academia during the time of COVID. I'm Tom Cruz, Digital Media Manager at FSU Libraries, and I'm joined today by two student colleagues from FSU.
Hi, I'm Finley. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a rising junior, a computer science major. I'm also on the executive board for Gender Odyssey, a transgender-focused RSO here at FSU. And I also work at the library. I am a assistant to the Distance Library Services Department.
Yay! I'm Lilly. Pronouns are she, her. I'm going to be a rising junior, some studio art major, and pre-law. If I'm not in the library, I'm usually in Dr. Jessica Ribeiro's lab. We have a meta-analysis that I think is wrapping up for the interpersonal theory of suicide, and then another one for interpersonal theory of eating disorders.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. How are y'all doing today?
I woke up pretty late, so
you're excellent.
yeah, I'm feeling the energy.
I woke up before noon, so I would count that a success. Yeah, we're groovy.
Why don't we talk a little bit about your individual backgrounds? Let's get to know each of you, and I guess where you're coming from when talk about your perspectives. So we have here one person from STEM, another student from the liberal arts, and we can start off from there.
Interestingly enough, I am a computer science major, but my friends say I have a heart in the arts, for lack of better words. I really do enjoy technology, but I also do really enjoy the arts, and I really enjoy being able to have the type of in-depth discussions that I think are more associated with liberal arts than with STEM. But I think that extending that kind of discussion to STEM and technology is important too.
I was pre-med until a month ago, and now we're pre-law.
But I think we're both happy where we're at, which is what's important right now.
How did COVID go from, I guess, being that abstraction in the headlines to your periphery to then affecting your lives individually?
I want you to talk about this because you had a moment, remember? When you were remember we were out on Landis?
Oh, yeah.
I want you to talk about it.
For the first week of spring break, it was still overreacting, yada, yada, yada. We're thinking it's mostly something for international students for their benefit. And so our mutual friend, Ezzy, she's like, let's go study on Landis Green. And then Finn told me that the library is closing today. And I was like, no. Erica Cooper certainly told me, and she would not tell lies, that the library was not going to close until next week, until after spring break. And Finn was swearing, no, on God, the library is closing today.
Yeah.
And so last time I was in the library, I left our patch of grass underneath the beautiful tree that has the gnarly hand looking shape. I ran over there. I have an ugly bun. I haven't brushed my hair. I'm in booty shorts. I got a crop top. I have my FSU ID, and I'm like, can I please go get books? And I'm yeah, whatever. And so I went to the sociology section, grabbed a bunch of propaganda. I got 6 books.
What kind of propaganda? You need to clarify.
Yeah.
Communist and anarchist propaganda. I have Sandino's Daughters. I have a copy of Marxism and Feminism, and it's 8 books, and then just scanning it out. I have this bridge called My Back, one of the first editions, and they're still sitting in a little pouch, waiting to be fully completed and finished. But I haven't gotten a single email to renew the checkout. Even the dude at the library was you're probably not going to have to return these till you graduate, because they had to redo a bunch of stuff in the system. So yeah. Oh, that hurt. They had just finished the new Starbucks because there was a whole period.
There was a whole
put the microwave in there. They put a microwave in there, and the microwave changed the game. We could have one dinner in the library.
We're not kidding when we say we lived in the library.
No, we had
our dinners in there together.
Such high hopes.
Complete strangers didn't know who we were, but they were
they knew that we were there all the time, and so they would ask us when's tutoring starting? Ask questions.
I remember this one dude. I didn't know him. Finley didn't know him. Eddie didn't know him. He's just oh, you guys are here earlier today. I was who are you? Who who are you? Like, sorry. He's like, I'm nobody. And he disappears behind like the bookshelves. We had clout. Like, that was it. And that was the last time I was in social library. My friend always says that the most big brain thing to do in a zombie apocalypse is protect the libraries, hole up in the libraries, because that's where all the knowledge is. Yeah, you need to start over.
You really sound like a simp for the library. I just want to say.
It's an incredibly racist institution, and it's so problematic, but I will simp for libraries. Yeah.
I was about to say, all those particular books that you checked out, was that like for personal preservation purposes?
It was for me. It was for me, because I was under the misguided illusion this was supposed to be like my hot girl intellectual summer, and I was going to read. We're still working on it.
Instead, you dropped out of pre-med.
So yeah, that hit you. That was that moment. And so how did things go from there? How was that journey?
Well, we had to smuggle each other into our own dorms because they wouldn't even let people between dorms. We had to like sneak into each other's dorm.
They had like a policy, no visitors, which made sense and everything. But even though both of us were in the dorms, we technically weren't allowed to visit each other's dorms. But she was taking me to get groceries like every single week because I didn't have a meal plan at all. I was just cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Meal plan became worthless anyway.
It did. I think that for me, probably when it really hit that like this COVID thing was really going to start like affecting my life was when I couldn't take the bus anymore to get groceries, and I had to start relying on my friends to help me get like groceries. Like, not that any of them had a problem with it. In fact, they were always trying to offer to take me to get rides to get groceries so that I wouldn't have to take the bus.
You should not have a femme-presenting person alone should not have to take the bus.
That's true. And so definitely once I stopped having like that mode of transportation, because I don't have a car and I can't drive. I do have my learner's permit. It definitely started to feel like, oh man.
kind of paint a picture for me of what was dorm life like in a regular way before that became disrupted.
For one, obviously, it's pretty noisy, right?
It is pretty noisy. The number of I know I personally, just like being a woman in the dorms, I would whenever you hear screaming, you have to be like, oh, okay, do I get up and obviously you get up every time you go look and make sure somebody's okay, because it's not a scream of joy or is a crime occurring. And I for one have seen boys with a drunk friend, just one limb each, just trying to get them to their room, and that's and they're loud and noisy and obviously yeah, it's a lot. Dorm is a hit or miss. You could wind up in a really quiet dorm and it'd be fine 5 days out of the week, and then
yes.
One day utter catastrophe.
On the topic of all of this student housing stuff, oof.
How was this information getting to you? How was it being communicated, if at all?
The communication was awful.
It was terrible. FSU will send out an alert right away for severe thunderstorm warning. Mm-hmm. But if it's anything that's going to actually impact your day to day or your life, you won't hear about it unless it's from another student. It's ridiculous. I remember that one time last semester where everybody was concerned there was an active shooter on campus. FSU PD was not saying anything. It was we don't want to start mass panic, and mass panic had already started.
On that note of communication, when we were in the dorms during that time, there was a situation where I had essentially got locked out of my dorm. You remember this?
Yes.
We were trying to move my stuff into the apartment where I'm at now, trying to take some of my stuff there. And I had accidentally left my key upstairs. And so we had gotten locked out.
Yeah.
And so we called the student number.
The student housing, and they said with the number on the lobby,
yes, they had a number. They had a number that said locked out, and call this number if you get locked out of the dorm, because obviously nobody's at the dorm. You're not going to be able to get anybody to let you in. And we called them, right? And so we finally got in touch with somebody, and she actually didn't even have a key.
She wasn't even in the dorm. She was on the other side of campus. They had one student employee for all the dorms on campus.
Yes, and
this is real.
She didn't actually have a key to Azalea specifically, and she had to contact somebody to get a master key to finally unlock it. And it's at that point, it was the end of the semester. It was late.
It was about to rain.
It was late April. At that point, it was why didn't they have a better idea of what to do at this point? I would understand if it was like right when the COVID-19 like pandemic started like affecting Florida and everything.
We were already wearing masks at this point.
Yes, it's true. And like they still like weren't prepared for a situation in which a student would get locked out of the dorms. That's something that happened that just speaks to the lack of communication that happened, not just to us, but clearly like within like the student housing infrastructure. And it speaks to the lack of communication that goes on broadly in FSU as well. So
Lord.
I think what's consistent is that so often that kind of experience is basically invisible to folks at the top who are trying to run this infrastructure, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation
but we're also
today.
like fortunate enough that it was occurring like in the mid-afternoon and I was there. Like I can't imagine how this situation would have gone down at night
if I was
by
alone,
yourself.
Yeah.
Like then what? You're waiting for somebody to maybe come and help you. Like
I was lucky that my friends
those
were with
hours.
me. Like, what if I had left my phone upstairs, right? Like, what on earth would I have done?
There's so many ways it could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah.
Basically.
I'm glad y'all were able to overcome that. I'm glad y'all have each other, especially. It sounds like that's been pretty essential for coping with all of this. I mean, between, you having each other, like what other things do you feel has offered some comfort amidst all the chaos?
I mean, definitely just because we're not like party people. We're not homebodies either. Like I promise, like we're cool and fun or whatever. but like kind of like the trust and like, no, like it's a privilege that like I can be over at like Finn's place right now and like not have to worry that like they've gone out and like done something irresponsible.
That's true.
Because not a lot of friends can say that like, oh, I know for a fact that my friend, when they're not with me, they're at home quarantining. Like being able with like a relative degree of safety to be able to say that I'm not putting anybody at risk by being here and spending time with them is something that not a lot of people can say. And that's not to make a moral judgment. Like some people have to go out and work. Some people like have to, like they're deemed essential or sacrificial or what have you. But
also we drive through college town and we hear parties.
Yeah. Oh God. Driving through college town. I live there and I will drive through, I'll see, is it Tin Lizzie's, one of them brunch type places. Everybody's there all hours of the day. They're wearing masks like they're bracelets. I don't agree with that, but whatever. But being able to like, to be able to hang out with like my friend and know that when I go home, I'm not gonna have to quarantine for 2 weeks or be putting my family at risk in any way. That's something that not a lot of people can say that they can do, especially because you have asthma.
That's true. I do have asthma.
So yeah, you have an example of someone who is immunocompromised. Oh man, that worries me. I haven't been like anywhere near venues and avoid going outside generally. Like I'm also in an immunocompromised household, so that is something that, even if we get things delivered, we're wiping it down. It's so bizarre how just the acquisition of food is now its own ritual.
Buying a new bottle of hand sanitizer and you spray it with the bleach before you use it.
For real.
That's true. That is something that I do.
Like the Jenny Holzer quote, it's in the intricate rituals. I know that when I was still in the dorm and I was still like because you don't understand that, like we woke up one morning and suddenly like it was here. Like we woke up, it was actually my 20th birthday. It was March 26th that the US was declared the epicenter of the pandemic.
Oh. And
like we woke up one day and it was very, very, very real in a way that it hadn't been the day before. And so I know that when I would go out, like first thing I would do when I would come in, just because I was so worried, I didn't know, like, it's new and a healthy bit of like fear and paranoia is, I guess, key and prevent. I don't know. But I know that when I stepped in, my shoes stayed outside of my dorm door. My clothes that I wore outside came off, went into the hamper like right away. Like outside of clothes were outside of clothes and inside of clothes were inside of clothes, and that was that. And my hair was up when I went outside because I don't know. My hair was up when I went outside, and it was like a whole thing. And I would shower as soon as I got back. It was like a whole thing. Going outside was like really filled with like a lot of fear of like the unknown, or like you would do something wrong, and that you would be evaluating your actions whenever like you went to Walmart or like to get groceries. You'd be like, I need to like take out the hand sanitizer or whatever. And is the fact that I'm not wearing gloves right now going to be the thing that I can point to later on, like when something goes awry, kind of.
And in the midst of all that, of fearing even going outside, there is unrest and a spark of nationwide and by extension international activism and protest and a disruption for the status quo. And how did that start to integrate itself into your lives?
When I think about it, definitely for me, because that started at particularly the death of George Floyd, as well as the multiple like Black Lives Matter protests that were happening nationwide. Tallahassee in specific has had, those two cases with Michael Johnson and Tony McDade that especially made Tallahassee a place where, oh yes, and Oluwatoyin, that was a bit later. But she also, the lack of oversight with her getting missing, yeah, definitely also played a part. Definitely for me, at least as a Black person, having that happen at the beginning of the summer semester was very, very difficult for me. Even though it's like, I don't have anywhere to go, right? But I still have lectures to watch. I still have work to do. I still have things that I have to get done. And knowing that all these horrible things were happening around me, going on social media and seeing police brutality literally all over the place with no sort of like...
You don't consent to see that when you log onto Instagram.
Definitely. And it's like, as much as I think that getting out the word is important, posting images of brutalized Black bodies and protesters is not necessarily the solution either. And so coping with that and managing all of that in the midst of a pandemic where it was not very easy to, I couldn't reach out. Like, I knew very well that my friends were distressed by the start of the summer semester and the pandemic and their lives not really going how they were planning for this summer. It made it very difficult because it's like, do I reach out to my friends? Do I talk to them, try to tell them what's on my mind? Or will that only place more of a pressure on them during this very, very difficult time, right? So managing that was very difficult for me. I definitely struck a balance over time of, taking care of myself and
your island on Animal
Crossing. My island on Animal Crossing. And also, looking out for my friends and reaching out to my friends so that they could look out for me.
That's something that became so important. And again, I can obviously only speak from my experience, but it felt like anything that I wasn't doing that couldn't help in some way felt like time wasted.
Yes, I think we both kind of felt that.
I knew that shit was for real when I was loading up my sparkling water from Walmart into my truck, and I had a call from my father, and he was born in Ecuador, so and my mom was from Cuba, so those countries and their authorities, it's a different mechanism when you're thinking of authority and what law enforcement is and means or what it should be and how it manifests. So I knew that things were happening because I got a call from my father and he's like, I know that you feel certain these ways, you should not be protesting. It is not safe for you. And I don't want you to do that out of fear for your safety. Not like fear of me getting arrested, but fear for my actual safety. And that was new. That was new because it was always toeing the line kind of. And I'm old enough now where that was a legitimate consideration that I had. I am 20, I have a certain amount of autonomy in what I do with my body at this point. And when I was kind of thinking about that, having already dropped off donations for mutual aid and whatnot, he was very adamant that he was very, very worried for my safety if I were to go out and protest. He said no matter what, peaceful, whatever, authorities don't care and whatnot. And he has the experience of having seen witnessed police brutality in the streets of Quito, Ecuador, where student uprising meant that students got disappeared, and same thing with my mother, where it's where a student uprising, if there was one, or any sort of dissent meant you or your family got disappeared. So I think, and seeing how that's manifesting now specifically, where they saw those parallels and they said that they felt the notion that they had to reach out to me to say do not do this because bad things will happen. I think that was a real shift because they came to America with a lot of gratefulness, a lot of the disconnect between the children of immigrants and the parents who first came is that they see America with like these rose-colored lenses and refuse to accept it for its faults because it's done so much for them, and that's a valid viewpoint to have. But when that veneer's kind of gone away and they express legitimate concern, I think that was a real turning point for them as well, where they saw like no matter like what was right or wrong, like they were like they knew that my body would be on the line and my safety would be on the line if I chose to go out and protest. Well, it definitely changed to pre-law after that, because in the wake of the pandemic, I was very much of the mindset that to be a good person was to sacrifice oneself, one's youth. And that's just the Catholic guilt more than anything, honestly. But like you work hard for somebody else was kind of the thinking in being pre-med and one day being a doctor. And then the pandemic, all these publications came out that like, and having my dad be a gynecologist, I was already aware of like the gross disparities in health treatment, specifically for Black women. But it was just like these things kept coming out about the giant disparities and all these, and how the pandemic was treating Black and brown individuals specifically because they are more likely to have asthma because of where they're going to live is going to have like more polluted air. But yeah, so at that point I was like, one cog in a machine is not going to do much. My being a doctor, I'm gonna have to read racist textbooks that says Black blood coagulates faster. I have to read about how Hispanics like to put potatoes on people's feet and they believe in like suffering and so they don't want pain medication. Like I've seen those textbooks and that's not something that I want to absorb, first of all. I'm not saying that law school is going to be, or the practice of law is any less racist, but just I was very much talking up the idea to myself that, you know, if you sacrifice like the 10, 12 years of your like prime, like reproductive years, your prime working years, your prime earning years to go and do this thing, I was thinking it would be like such a great difference. But my giving one patient free healthcare would not have undone an institution. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, actually. And I'm glad to hear that change contextualized that way. Finley, you've briefly touched on work you've done, such as, you know, speaking at the vigil.
Personally involving myself, you know, there was definitely like a fear, you know, like putting myself in activism, what kind of risks will I be putting myself up to? But I think with all the things happening this summer, right, I definitely felt a bit more called to try and get involved. I attended a vigil for Tony McDade, who was one of the individuals that was murdered by the Tallahassee Police Department. And I spoke at that vigil. That was also a sad, but very also, I would say, transformative experience. And I guess if I want to be able to apply that sort of activism to like my future aspirations, naturally being Black and queer person going into the technology field, some people would say is like a move of activism in and of itself. But it's definitely something. Yeah, I want to sort of bring to attention the biases that are already in like the tech field in general and sort of work to dismantle those and push forward more of the narrative that like tech isn't free from bias and that we need to have more important discussions and be sure that we're including the right kinds of people in our development of technology so that we can have more inclusive technology.
God, I'm so glad that work's being done. I'm sad it's not like
definitely
at the original behest of FSU, but I'm glad that it's got the visibility and the, as trite as it sounds, the conversation has started. On this note, we had some news recently regarding FSU. You know what I'm working up to. Why don't you tell the story? You tell it better.
Yeah.
So for someone who's never, let's imagine someone who's never come to FSU. What's this whole deal about a statue?
There was a protest. Actually, there was a protest. There was a protest a while ago in front of the F statue in which he was like draped with his crimes against humanity. They were calling attention to the fact that you have a slaveholder on campus and you're kind of revering him as like the founder of FSU or what have you, but he like owned living, breathing human beings with thoughts, agency, and emotion. Initially, Thrasher gave like a like lukewarm like Joe Biden take where he was going to be like, we set up a task force that I myself have appointed, a task force on racism and inclusion. Oh my God, look at me! And it was very tired. And people on Twitter and on Facebook were like, we didn't ask for a task force. We want the removal of the statue. We want EPs out of here. Like, we want them gone. Yeah, earlier this week, I woke up to a Twitter notification and I saw that a local Tallahassee photojournalist published a photo, and I was like, that looks familiar. Like, I kind of know where that is. And I clicked on it, and the F statue was gone. And I was actually really surprised that it happened that quickly.
There was a lot of
pressure online. I know that there was like an actual real life protest during a pandemic in the rain to go remove the statue.
There were multiple protests there at the location of the statue, mostly organized, I think, by TCAC.
It was mostly TCAC.
Tallahassee
Community Action Coalition.
So that's really exciting. Something that we were actually talking about in our Gender Odyssey meeting yesterday was how incredible it is that it got removed in the first place, and how they might put it back, but the fact that they got put it back.
Lord, I hate it here.
So I actually have the email here with Thrasher saying, I agree that the Francis W. Epps statue should be immediately placed off campus as the task force begins its work.
Off campus? Okay.
The panel members will make final recommendations on specific symbols and names of buildings on campus, including the statue, Epps Hall, Douglas Campbell Stadium, and will examine how best to reflect FSU's values in relation to its historical connections. My alarms start going off because I'm very much like, okay, what's going to be the difference between your public relations response and your action? And it sounds like, obviously y'all are just as desirable of like, great, nice words, what's going to happen? And so, removal of the Epps statue, the fact that it's at least not, in our faces with that amount of misplaced confidence, it's something.
On that note, I actually want to just bring up how incredible it is that during this pandemic, there's been so much local activism that's been going down. And if anything, I want to say it's almost stronger in the middle of a pandemic, which is crazy to imagine, right? But we see the situation with the Epps statue. We see all the Black Lives Matter protests. We saw the response that students had to a situation regarding SGA. We saw all kinds of we saw all kinds of responses coming from students and the Tallahassee community as a whole. I think it's really promising, just seeing all of these students come forward, seeing the community come forward and fight for these things.
I'm glad you brought that up. That is something I have so much appreciation for is the fact that there are people who they recognize the importance. They're willing to put their bodies doubly at risk for efforts that are well worth it. And it's good to see the needle moving at least a bit. And it's just a matter of keeping that momentum. I'm really hoping for that. Thank you, by the way. Well, this has been great. I've had a lot of fun, and I felt like I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for offering your time and your perspective. I think it just feels good to.
Of course.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm sorry for all the stuff you're gonna have to cut.
No, but I think that we said a lot. We said a lot of really good things. I think things that I hope people will watch and see. And I think that all of these conversations that we've had are conversations that the entire FSU community needs to be having, and even the Tallahassee community for some things. And yet we're not getting that. So fingers crossed it changes. Right?
Well, thank you for embarking on this journey with me, and y'all please do take care.
Yes, thank you.